Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Contrast. My name is Alan.
And I'm Nisha.
And on this podcast, we talk about movies and the books they're based on.
The catch is you watch the movie and I read the book, with a few exceptions.
That's right. And today we have a very special episode, just a mere 2 days from your birthday.
As of recording.
Not on release, but
Not
that's
on
okay.
release.
That's how that goes. But as of this exact moment in time, 2 days from your birthday.
2 days from my birthday.
So happy birthday.
Thank you. It's Aries season, baby.
It sure is. God help us all. Mm-hmm. So that means that you got the lucky, opportunity to pick this episode.
Yeah, and I actually was thinking about this, and I'm not sure why, but I picked water for elephants.
You're not sure why?
Yeah, I don't really know why I picked that for my birthday.
It stuck out to you, you know? You have some memories that we'll get into about the movie. It is one that you've seen before.
I have seen it. I saw it in high school.
Mm-hmm. It's been a long time. Yeah, probably I would have been right about when it came out. So
A little bit after, I think.
Okay, yeah, I guess. Well, it came out in 2011.
Oh, did it?
So
well,
you would have been towards the end of high school.
I was confusing the novel's release date.
Right.
The novel came out in 2006. It is a historical romance by Sara Gruen, and it's set in like the early, mid 1900s. Somewhere in there. They don't actually ever specify. In the book, they don't specify.
Notably, there's a couple scenes in the movie that make it very clear it's during Prohibition.
Good point, actually. I was like, I kept looking at descriptions and being like, when the heck was this set? And for some reason I didn't put those two together because the book is set during Prohibition. That should be...
Yeah, there's a scene where the party gets raided by Prohibition police.
Yeah, that's in the book too. It's a Prohibition book. The book was actually written for NaNoWriMo, or National Novel Writing Month, which is frankly amazing if Sara Gruen wrote this in a month.
Yeah, and got success out of it. That's great.
Yeah, that's really, really wonderful. If you don't know, I'll just take a moment to explain what NaNoWriMo is. You're supposed to write 50,000 words in a month, November. And 50,000 words is about the length of a novel. Technically, it is novel length. That's too short for most published
It's on the
novels.
shorter end,
Yeah, that maybe a romance would be 50,000 words. But you are technically writing a novel. I think this book, I don't know how many words it is. It is 331 pages. I suspect it's long. It's more than 50,000
Yeah,
words.
that sounds more like pushing 70 or something.
Yeah, which is more normal for that
that's
genre.
a very average length book.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a lot to write in a month. I don't know if she did this in exactly the month or if she spilled over a little bit.
Inevitably, there would have been lots of editing and things after.
I just mean the first draft, though. And to anyone who's done NaNoWriMo, and as they say, one NaNoWriMo finished your 50,000 words, that is an amazing feat.
Yeah.
Writing every day throughout a month is an amazing feat, even if you wrote 2 words someday.
Which that's ultimately the point of it, right? It's an accountability exercise. It's a challenge for a writer, to try to be on top of things and try to push themselves to write more and more. I don't know that most people go into it fully expecting to finish a novel that will then get published. I feel like that's not the point for most people, so that's pretty impressive that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously in the writer, professional writer sphere more than hobbyist writer sphere.
Yeah.
So I do know people who have written books in NaNoWriMo to get published.
Sure.
Or with the intention of publishing it. I don't think I know anyone who's achieved that.
It'd be tough. I mean,
because publishing on its own is hard. And then, like you said, the editing process is just so long. And personally, I don't participate in NaNoWriMo because I think such a heavy focus on word count will reduce the quality of your output usually.
It depends on how you approach it, I think, and it's going to work for some people and not for other people. I know you've tried it in the past and, had some amount of success, but it didn't work for you necessarily the way you wanted.
Yeah, it's just not my thing.
Yeah.
But
you try to be consistent
Yes.
throughout the year, which
Yes.
is, I think, generally better. It's fine to, it's the same as dry January or something. It's okay, you take a month off of drinking, it might be good, but it's better just not to drink as much throughout the year and
Yes.
keep it consistent. It's one of those similar things.
Yes, and I think much like Dry January, it's in the hopes of inspiring that you
Right.
continue this lifestyle. Maybe not to the same extent. But I think NaNoWriMo is really cool. There are other similar versions. I think there's like one in June or July. They're all over. So if you want to participate, it's always happening, and you can always do your own thing.
Yeah, and again, you can make it into whatever you want, right? Like, you can just challenge yourself with a writing sprint or any of these other little exercises. You know, it doesn't have to be like writing a 50,000-word book in a month. But
absolutely. And there is validity in short stories, in novelettes, in novellas, which are two different things. But let's go back to Water for Elephants.
Yeah, so I'm just... It really caught my attention that this was a NaNoWriMo book.
Yes, absolutely.
Really
and
cool.
Actually, something kind of cool about this that I learned today was that Sara Gruen was in the middle of another book
when she started it.
And she saw photos from the Ringling Brothers circus, I think, around that time period, around the 1920s.
Ringling Brothers.
Ringling Brothers.
Damn those bastards.
And she was like, I'm writing this. And I don't think she finished that other book ever. The interview I saw was in 2024, and it seemed to imply she never finished it. Yes.
I mean, that's a thing that happens.
Yeah.
Every writer probably has a lot of abandoned projects.
It is supremely normal. And while you should never throw things away, sometimes you just got to accept that this is not for right now, and I'm going to move on to something else.
Right.
And that's what she did. And she became a #1 New York Times bestseller.
Very impressive. Yeah, I don't know much about her. I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about with her as a writer, as a person, but this was very clearly a success for her.
Yeah. Well, let me just say also that she was nominated for several other awards, and she won winner of 2007 Book Browse Award for Most Popular Book. She just was really successful. And the coolest thing about this book is that it is banned in a school district in Texas.
I saw that. Yeah, the Katy, Texas Independent School District.
Katy Independent School District. Yeah. Yes, and I believe it was for like nudity and sexual content.
I was going to ask. I didn't look into why. I was going to ask why it was. Is the book particularly explicit about anything?
Yeah. So I'm going to dive right into a comparison because I was sitting in the room when you first started the movie. And there's the scene with the stripper. Mm-hmm. And it was like shoulders up, maybe you saw her tassels going around from the back. Oh my gosh. In the book, it is so explicit.
Really?
I almost thought it went on for a little long. But she's talking about these big old cantaloupes hanging down, swinging in circles and slapping each other.
Not the swinging melons.
Oh my gosh. And she's just talking at the first time he's seen a nipple and oh boy.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a long scene too.
That's fascinating. Mm-hmm. Seems unnecessary. I mean, I am not one that's like, I don't even think that things like that have to serve the plot, but there is a point where you have to ask the question of like, what are we getting out of this?
Yeah. So I had that thought too, and I kind of was like, well, and I feel like it's like, well, let me say, it's made a huge deal of that Jacob Jankowski, our 23-year-old / 93-year-old protagonist, is a virgin.
Oh, okay.
And he's like really trying to get that at the beginning of the book.
Okay.
And he's like, look at these big old boobies and like, look at this naked lady. And he's like so amazed and enthralled. And something that's really wonderful is that she's not described. I can't remember if this is Lottie or someone else, but she's never described in a degrading way per se.
Sure.
It did feel a little men right women-y.
Even though it's not.
Even though it's not. But there's a
But
big...
it's also capturing the male gaze
to
an extent.
Yeah, because we're following a male character who is a virgin. That being said, I don't really understand why him being a virgin was such a huge part of the plot early on.
I had no idea that was a thing. They do not really talk about that in the movie. Like, they sort of, imply, like, oh, he's very naive and childish and, like, hasn't really been out in the world because he's just sort of been in his little bubble of studying veterinary medicine at Cornell, and, he's on this, like, great trajectory.
Yes.
But it's implied that he's not very, world-wise at the start of this story.
Yeah, and I love that he is naive at the beginning, because by the end he's really not. He's been through the ringer, right? Ringling. He's been through the ringling. But I don't think it needs to be hammered in that much that he's a virgin.
I mean, I see the point of it to highlight the fact that he's young and naive.
Yes.
But what does it give the story for it specifically to focus on that so much? Because to me, that would almost take away from any importance of the romance itself, because he's just, someone in that state of mind is not trustworthy.
Yeah.
They don't know the difference between love and lust and what's happening. And, like, he's doing a lot for a woman in this story.
Yeah.
And, does that really serve the point of the romance?
It does not, really. And that's not to say your first love cannot be your last love.
Oh, sure, there's always something special about that,
But most people who have been in marriages and long-term relationships and stuff will say that being in multiple relationships beforehand will serve you well.
Yeah, it gives you perspective that's important. You could always be lucky and gain that perspective over time, and it just so happens that it was the right relationship.
Yeah.
There's always a bit of a shot in the dark about that, but.
Yeah. And I think also what's interesting about the book is he has a girlfriend
in the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess, yeah, he does sort of. Oh, that's right, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so it's like you're making such a big deal out of this, like, naivete and that he's a virgin, which, by the way, virginity is a social construct. I'm just gonna say that.
Well, sure.
But, like, they make such a big deal out of it. Mm-hmm. And he has a girlfriend who he's like, I want to bang. And it just...
And in the movie, he says, I'm going to marry her.
Yeah.
He's
that
very clear
almost
about that.
feels like... I can't remember if he says that in the book, but I like that. Because that really, like, this is her, I'm going to marry her, does sometimes have that sense of naivety. Like, how many times have you had a friend be like, this is who I'm marrying? And you're like, no, you're not.
But this is, yeah, so that's weird, and I am curious how much more detail it goes into about his sort of life leading up to the ultimate event that propels him on this journey, But it works well in the film, like, just in a very basic way, to be like, he had this good life. He was about to graduate Cornell. He was very successful. He had a girlfriend who he planned to marry. He's ticking the boxes of a successful life at a young age at this point, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, things happen and everything spirals out of control. We'll get to that in a second. But, like, it does set that up well. And I wouldn't have gotten anything else, like, if there was a scene of, someone pushing him into a locker and, like, saying, hey, virgin nerd, or something. Like,
Alan,
I just don't see the point.
Is there not a scene in the book where he gets put into a chest?
Oh, yeah, at the circus.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's, playful.
It is at the circus, and it is later. It is a little bit similar to getting pushed into a locker and being called a virgin nerd.
At that point, at least in the movie, he was so blackout drunk that he didn't remember what happened. But
yeah, he blacks out drunk and doesn't remember what happens. I want to rewind a little bit. You didn't get to introduce the movie.
Oh, I guess not.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this is, a little more straightforward than some of our other episodes. Again, this is a more recent book. Movie came out just 5 years after.
Yep.
So a movie was released in 2011. There's only been the one adaptation.
Yes.
We will also mention that there is a stage adaptation.
A musical. And it's fairly recent.
Very recent.
Yes.
So that opened, I think, in Atlanta just a couple of years ago in 2023.
Was it 2023 or 2024?
23.
Okay.
And then it moved to Broadway last year.
Or maybe that's what
you're thinking of. which I think it's gotten like pretty middling reviews, like not great, not bad, just sort of down the middle. Which I think might describe my feelings about the whole thing.
Yeah, same.
Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's an accessible story, and
Yeah, I would say that our tastes aren't. We don't scream accessible.
Yes, we're not quite that pedestrian.
Pedestrian. The plebs can have water for elephants.
Except your favorite movie is a Riddick movie. So.
Yeah, well, okay. We'll talk about that another time.
This is why we are, we have elevated taste, but we're of the people. Right?
We are of the people, yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, not going to talk anymore about the stage production, but that seems to be a recurring theme, or just like maybe something I didn't know was such a thing, that like a lot of these stories that we've talked about in these books and movies, like they have been adapted into stage plays a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we've been looking at a lot of things. By now, we've done quite a few movies. We've done almost 15. And so many of those had stage adaptations. We recently discovered there's even a Broadway musical for SpongeBob.
Uh-huh.
Like, what will they not turn into a Broadway musical?
I think that's ultimately what it is that at first I was like, oh, are we just choosing all of these properties that happen to have musical? No, I think they just make musicals for damn near everything.
Yeah. And, I guess there's a lot of theaters on Broadway and then off Broadway.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they're all over the place, right?
Yeah. And then in the wider United States.
Yes, of course.
So you don't really think about it, but like they're not getting like a reel to play, right? So they can kind of just do their own thing.
Right.
I mean, getting a script, you have to write a script, but that's different than filming a whole movie.
Of course, yeah. It's more accessible for a lower production, lower budget, lower, you don't need quite as much resources to make something like that happen.
Yeah. Who is in this movie? Who's in it?
So our main character, Jacob Jankowski, is played by ya boy, Robert Pattinson.
Yep.
He was pretty well known at this point. He hadn't done like a ton of stuff post Twilight, I don't think.
No, but people knew him.
But people obviously knew him pretty well at this point. Which obviously he has, grown into many, many other different kinds of roles in the years since. But this was kind of in that in-between period. And then we have as the female love interest / lead performer of the circus, Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting cast choice for this.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that, but yeah. And then, of course, we have, which we'll talk about some of the slight differences in how characters are used and presented. There, I believe, are a couple of characters that are not present in the film and instead are just kind of rolled into other people.
Okay.
Pretty common, in these kind of adaptations. But so the owner of the circus / sort of the day-to-day helps with the animal training and is also Marlena's husband is played by Christoph Waltz.
Yes. And Marlena's husband, August, excuse me, is in the book is the head of like equestrian and animal
he's
affairs.
Sort of like the head animal trainer sort of thing.
Not a very good animal trainer, but that's what he's in charge of. Mm-hmm. And then there's another guy who owns the circus.
Right, Uncle Al.
Yeah, Uncle Al, who's not present a lot. So I get why they would roll him into one. Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah.
It does. It makes it somewhat complicated in ways that like somewhat work for me and somewhat don't. That like, so Christoph Waltz is inherently likable to me on screen.
But he's really good at playing villains.
He is good at playing villains, but so it's like, it's straddling this weird line with him, in other words, that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
Okay.
Where he does become likable, but then because you're getting so much of this, like, other cruelty that's done by Uncle Al wrapped into him, you're getting some of that from the beginning. So it's like part of his character is like, over time, Jacob is starting to see how abusive he is and this and that. But at the beginning, he knows that he just throws people off the train, so he doesn't have to pay them money, you know? So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so it complicates things a little bit. It doesn't always work, but I see why they did it.
And I also, so that's something that's really interesting about August in the book, which I think is actually like really well written, is that sometimes he's really likable and sometimes he's not. And you do go back and forth as the reader. And like you can kind of see the progression into Jacob doesn't like him as much. But and this is, you know, I actually think this is probably the best thing that she did in the book, is that there is that, like, when you first meet him, he's kind of arrogant and like a jerk.
Yeah.
And then you learn to like him a little bit more.
Jacob, you mean?
August.
Oh, August.
August is an arrogant jerk.
Oh, okay.
And then you like learn to like him more. And then it kind of like you're like, but there's something about him that I don't like. And like you can just tell there's something off. And like you don't want to like him. And then there are periods where you're like, maybe he is okay.
Yeah.
And then it culminates in being like, oh no, he's not okay.
Yeah, which the film does manage to go on that journey a little bit, you know? Again, like, it's complicated because you immediately don't trust him, like some of the things that he says, but it does use like Christoph Waltz's charisma to its advantage in that way, so that you do still find him somewhat likable until things spiral out of control.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, even at the beginning, he's talking about, again, throwing people off trains, you know.
While the train is moving.
While the train is moving.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of hoping they die.
Yeah.
He doesn't care necessarily.
Yeah, the point of throwing them off the train is that they're not your problem anymore,
Right.
and you don't really care if they survive.
Yes, which we'll get into this. There's not a lot of difference in the way he treats animals and humans. Let's just say that.
Yeah, they're all his like commodity.
Yeah, they're all like just a tool for him to exploit, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he says these things. He's always saying these things like, you know, that normal laws don't apply to them. That like I forget the exact phrasing that they use in the movie, but he's basically like, in this circus, we're like a sovereign nation. So we don't have to adhere to the laws of the land or this or that, you know.
Interesting.
This is something he tells Jacob very, very early.
Yeah, that does feel very Uncle Al.
You're right. I'm almost positive that's what that is.
Yeah.
And as far as I understand it in the book, Uncle Al is the one that's all about throwing people off trains. And
yeah, I would say August is not like anti-throwing people off trains, but that's Uncle Al's problem.
Yeah.
And that's Uncle Al is the one who's instigating it. And definitely, I mean, he's the owner. He's the one in charge of it.
Right, of course.
August is in charge of animals. So, like, I definitely see how combining them makes sense, but August has to be a little likable in the beginning, even if you're conflicted. It can't be like, oh, he's throwing people off trains, he's bad. Like, you have to be like, well, he was a little arrogant, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's complicated.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work, but so we should also say, you know, the way that the story is framed, it's not completely out of left field or anything, but it's, you know, we're looking back from the future, so we're kind of the framing of the story is like set in modern day, and then we're looking into the memory of Jacob Jankowski from the future.
Yes, and the openings are similar, I believe, with this old guy who's kind of recalling his past.
Yeah, he's somewhere around 90 years old.
Yeah, in the book, he can't remember if he's 90 or 93.
Sure.
And in the book, it's basically every other chapter is him as an old man.
Is that so? I didn't realize that.
Yes. So there's a whole nother story in the book that's not in the movie.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to, you know, fill some of those gaps in, I guess, as we go.
Yeah, well, I don't really know. I think it's not really gaps. It's just another story that's running concurrent.
Well, I think that they do generally hit the beats of it, just not spread out.
Yeah.
In the movie.
Yeah.
So in the movie, it's very straightforward. Like, we see him as an old man. He comes up to the circus that's in town. Mm-hmm. You don't really see where he came from or anything. Mm-hmm. The people that are working there, they're kind of starting to pack up, you know, and so they start talking to him, and they're basically like, hey, you missed it. And he's like, I'm just here to visit. They realize that he's probably from a nearby nursing home.
Yeah.
And that they want to help him get back, but he starts talking to them and, explaining that he had like a personal connection to the circus. And that's the framework that gets the story started as he starts to tell this, memories of his past life, basically. And so it just goes straight at, we get the scene of him, the Saving Private Ryan style, like moving from old man to young Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, and then they're on the beaches of Normandy.
Right, yeah, he goes through D-Day.
Yeah, and then they set up a tent in the middle of World War II. Alan was holding up numbers for me, but it was a little late.
But yeah, so just normal transition there, and then you get the entire story of Jacob Jankowski up until where it kind of just goes ... at the end, and then we go back to the modern day of him as an old man finishing the story. And there's no peppering in between.
Yeah. We don't get to the circus as an old man until the end.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I mean. It's its own storyline.
But I don't think it does anything like importantly different.
Yeah, except we learn about his whole family, and this was honestly my favorite part of the novel, was being with him as an old man and seeing. I thought Sara Gruen did such an amazing job of capturing how isolating it can be to be an old person in a nursing home, and his memory is starting to go a little bit, but he's not like quite dementia, and then there's like nurses he doesn't like as much and nurses he does like, and we see that like we just followed this like journey of him wanting to go to the circus and watching them set up from outside. It's like in the like a parking lot across the road or something.
Okay. So he can just like see it from the home.
Yeah, and like everyone's talking about how their families are coming to take them to the circus. And then his son does not come. And he's left.
That's quite sad.
Yeah, he's left alone. He's gotten dressed up and he was so excited. And I think the important part is that you learned through the book why the circus is so important to him. And you learn about his love for his wife and his family and how important they were to him and how his wife has died. And something really impactful is they don't say the wife's name until the end.
Oh.
Which you can kind of guess who the wife will probably be. But because Sara Gruen leaves this lingering, like you don't know until the very last few chapters for sure. It works super well. And then he goes on his own with his little walker. Like he's usually in a wheelchair. And he scuffles to the circus on his own. And then he runs away with the circus.
Right, yeah.
It's so goofy. But the rest of that story is just like heart aching and it just tears at you. And like, I just was like, if I had any of my grandparents alive right now, I would go visit every single one of them.
Yeah.
And like, that was the biggest thing I got out of this story. And it was just so, it like ripped me apart.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's so, so beautiful.
You don't really, you don't think about the loneliness of a life lived, especially when you're the last one in it.
Yeah, and he talks about how he has like 5 kids or something, and they all have grandkids. Like his family's huge now, and he is so alone.
Right.
And,
which is, I mean, unfortunately normal. Everyone lives their own lives and things, but there's a particular type of loneliness there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this one really stings because he doesn't have to be so alone.
Right.
Like his family only visits on Sundays for like an hour and then they'll get up and leave. And I recognize how hard it is to visit like grandparents who are losing their memory and all that stuff. But like, this was just, Sara Gruen wrote this when she was not very old. And somehow she just captured this like that is exactly what it must feel like.
Yeah.
Like, that was the most I empathized with any of the characters and the most I felt engrossed in the story. I literally had a few chapters where I was like, why are we back at the circus? Take me back to the nursing home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you used a good word, like it pulls empathy out of you, but from her as a writer, that's a really powerful statement of empathy, I think, to be able to capture that as a young person.
Yes.
You know, that shows a certain skill of being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about this later because I don't want to completely derail it from the story. But if you read about Sara Gruen as a person, empathy is perhaps her greatest strength and greatest weakness, and that it may have ruined her life.
Why do you say that?
Because she gave up so many years of her life to save a man in prison.
I don't know anything about any of this.
Yeah. So it was shortly after the book came out. She got a letter from a prisoner, Charles Murdoch. And he says how much he loves the book, and he tells her about what's going on, and she believes with every fiber of her being that he was falsely convicted. And she basically ruined her finances, her safety. She was running from people. She was getting death threats, rape threats, people saying she deserved those things.
My goodness.
And she persevered. And Charles Murdoch is still in prison, and they have not reviewed his trial, even though new evidence has come out.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
And it's just wild.
That's crazy.
It's
yeah.
absolutely wild. And I think that it shows in her writing that she is that empathetic of a person.
Right. But you're right. Yeah. To a detriment almost. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I think it's her greatest strength, because look at the writing she did. Look at this old man she wrote and how she made someone who's, about to turn 31 just feel heart-wrenching and feel the isolation. Mm-hmm. And then also look at how deep she went for someone in real life. But she also always invested in people she loved and animals. That's not the only story of her deep, unending empathy and compassion and love,
Wow, that's really something. Yeah, I had no idea about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huh. Well, yeah, I like, and the movie doesn't fully capture what you're describing because it doesn't go into as much detail. Again, I don't think the difference in the framing and not peppering in the nursing home in between, it doesn't fundamentally change the story.
Yes.
But it does change what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it captures that to some degree, but so we never see him in the nursing home. We're only at the circus. Mm-hmm. He's detailing all of this to the circus. It's not just him thinking about it. He is telling the story to a person.
Yeah.
It doesn't really go into the detail about his family or anything. It mentions, some of what you're talking about. They visit once a week and this and that, but it doesn't give that same level of power to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, what it did sort of touch on, at least that it made me think about, but I think clearly is more of a purposeful choice in the book, is that this story essentially, he gets the happy ending.
Yeah.
When he's talking about he as a young person and the events of this story that are the most noteworthy, he gets the ... happily ever after. But then it's not ever that simple, right?
Yeah.
He got this great life, but then what's on the other end of it?
Yeah, and it sounds like while the book goes more in depth into that, both the novel and the book decide to take that happily ever, but what's after it?
Right.
You know what I mean? And explore that to varying extents, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think in the film you have to sort of read between the lines a little bit to grasp the loneliness. It's there.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not painting such a picture of it.
Yeah.
And, it's more of just him kind of thinking about this life that he had and, retaining that sense of this is me coming home, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't fully grasp like the details of the feelings there.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, this is basically 2 stories in one. And obviously they're intertwined in the novel, but you kind of, it's hard to do that in a movie, you know?
Yeah.
You don't have, how long is this movie? 2 hours?
Right at 2 hours.
Like, how are you going to do 2 stories in 2 hours?
No,
it's
you can't.
very, very difficult. And it's the same thing with Uncle Al and August. You have to make cuts.
Yeah.
And I entirely understand why you would do the circus over the old man, even though I much prefer the story about the old man. I don't think it would make a very good movie, though.
And, well, that's the thing, is that it's not even just about the time you have to portray things. It's somewhat jarring in movies when you go back and forth from perspective so much. I mean, I love lots of movies where you're constantly jumping around perspectives. It works, but like not for a story like this. You don't want that in a movie.
Yeah.
You know.
And in books it works because you're like chapter 9.
Right. You can hop back and forth easily. But yeah, it would just be jarring and kind of mess up the pacing in the movie.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, is that if this was like a mini series,
yeah, that
and
could
you
be
had
funny.
like half the episode, like the first half of the episode was dedicated to him in the nursing home, and the second half of the episode was at the circus, or even alternating or something like that.
Frankly, I think they even could have gotten across the same thing with just changing a couple minor details. Like, I think rather than opening with him just shuffling up to the circus, like even just a short scene of him looking out the window at the circus.
Yeah, which he does a lot of.
Right. Like they don't have that in the movie, but just that, and then really marking down the realization that like his family was supposed to meet him and his son didn't show up.
Yeah.
Those are excluded, and I think just including those 2 things and leaving everything else the same would have presented it in that way, but I think it was a purposeful choice because the movie itself, I think, is supposed to be sort of a middle of the road. It's a little saccharine at times, not fully, but it's trying to be this very accessible romance story.
Yeah.
And so I think that was probably a purposeful pullback, which doesn't, like, I'm here for the actual, like, true emotional hit,
Yes.
which doesn't necessarily get me from just the romance, right? Mm-hmm. Especially, which we'll talk about other issues with just the film itself in that aspect. But, I would have personally preferred that they hammered home the emotions of it a little bit more, but I get why they didn't.
Yeah. As we keep coming back to this word, accessible.
Yeah. Of course.
That there's the movie. So I think the book is quite accessible. Mm-hmm. The movie is probably even more so.
It's very much a studio movie.
Like, where are the swangin' cantaloupes? Right?
Yeah, they're on the other side of the camera.
Exactly. So, there are things like that, and like, just tweaks they've made that maybe take out some of the grit and darkness. And I mean, in books, you have so much more space, and I think people expect some of that a little bit more sometimes.
It's also just, you can only show so much on screen. It has different effects than people, visualizing it in their head.
Yeah.
So it just, it's up to, again, like in a book, you can get away with that a little bit more of, people will see it the way that they're going to see it. But on screen, it's just right there in front of you. So it's very purposeful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's, I know we've sort of gone back and forth on if we want to get, fully going down the synopsis style of, breaking down the story. Yeah. I don't think we need to go full into it, but, just to give some more framework. So again, we've mentioned how, Jacob was this, on a great trajectory in his life, was nearing graduation at Cornell as a veterinarian, which is, of course, very prestigious Ivy League school.
Yep.
Again, he had the girlfriend that he viewed as a fiance. I don't know if they were actually engaged or anything, but, again, just going down this great path, and then something happens.
Yes. He's in class, and the dean walks in and pulls him aside, and Jacob Jankowski finds out that his 2 loving parents have died in a car crash. Mm-hmm. And I mean, through, the next few scenes and everything, you find out he has nothing to his name.
Yeah, so essentially what had happened, which is ironic now that I think about it, considering what you were talking about with the author, that, like, his parents, like, he's sort of chastised, at least in the movie, by the bank, talking about how he's not going to inherit their family home or their business or anything because his father was very kind, and he often would not take payment in cash. He would do bartering or let people pay in whatever way they could, or even just sort of let them off the hook.
Yes, his father was also a veterinarian.
Right. So, like, you know, he basically would do free work sometimes or this or that, and so he was always sort of struggling to stay above water in terms of financial stability.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is retroactive that we're learning this, but that's, yeah, it's kind of interesting considering what you're talking about with the whole inmate thing.
Because that sounds like something Sara Gruen would do.
Right.
Like, if she was a vet, she would totally be like, let me save your animal.
Mm-hmm.
I know how important animals are and how, you know, like it really feels like her.
I mean, it's the difference of, you know, someone being in a profession for the money and someone doing it because they love it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's clear what it is, and that never really changes in terms of, you know, Jacob very much goes on to be much like his father in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he does. And I think it's in the book, it's pretty clear that, like, Jacob does see the folly of his father's ways.
Sure.
But he then realizes it's almost better to just be a good person.
Right. This is an active choice. Like that, There's always a line to be straddled, right? Like, you don't have to throw away your life to help someone else.
Yeah.
You know, and in fact, in many cases, that might be the worst choice because you're no longer able to help anyone else. You know, you do what you can, but you have to also look out for yourself, right? But it's that difference of, you know, like, again, this banker is like, don't be like your father. He was a fool and this and that, you know, and you see that same cruelty being shown in someone like August, you know, who's mistreating these animals and things. And it's like, you don't have to be cruel either.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there is a middle ground of being like, I have to support myself so I can support others, but also you just simply have to support yourself. But also you don't have to be cold and cruel to those who, you know,
exactly
need your help. There are maybe ways you could help, this is really funny, but we were just at the vet, and the vet we were talking to literally said that all of these doctors were about to walk out because corporate was trying to increase prices. Mm-hmm. And it, like, there are still people like this today. Obviously, you know, the world revolves around money, so, like, we have to pay the vet. But, like, the fact that, like, these vets and these people still care that much, like, people like that exist.
Right.
And it's just funny that, like, that just happened, and now we're talking
That's
about
true.
Basically the same thing, where this guy was like, I'm not gonna put up with this. I'm gonna rebel in his own way, which he owns his own business. So rebelling is, here, give me potatoes. But, you know, like, there's still people who want these things to be accessible.
Yes. And again, it's really about where your heart is, you know, and just making the right choice in each moment. You don't have to, like, adhere to this rule that you'll only ever do things for other people, or, like, you know, but like, in other words, it's okay to make money.
Yes.
It's okay to get by and live your life and have fun and do all these things, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of other people.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Because it feels like more and more and more that it all just keeps dividing further and further away to these extremes, right? So
yeah.
That I think applies to any part of life, really.
We can support ourselves and each other. Mm-hmm. It's really that simple.
Yeah, it really is. Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, talking about his father and some of this stuff, it reminds me of our To Kill a Mockingbird episode. It's very reminiscent of Atticus Finch.
It is. It really is, yeah. Because Atticus Finch also does law work for not a lot of money.
Yeah, he would, again, trade or, you know, do this and that. It's one of the first scenes in the movie, and I think in the book, is him, you know, offering legal services to someone for, like, some chickens or something, you know?
Yeah. And then also with that, when he, you know, does the huge case and everything like that, the whole community comes together and like loads up his kitchen table.
Yeah.
Like,
right. Yeah, it is. It's also, it's all tied together to that point of like, I mean, it's all karma, really, right?
Yeah,
it
is.
You may not believe in that as like an actual spiritual force, but there is a societal give and take there.
Yeah, what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
Like, you take care of someone else and they'll usually take care of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that's enough philosophical discussion.
Gotta have it.
We do. We absolutely do. Jacob can't take his test.
Yeah.
He just is so overwhelmed with grief, which is extremely fair. I don't even know why they were like, yeah, go ahead and take the test. I would be like, why don't you take a week?
Yeah, dude, give him a break.
Yeah. I have no idea why anyone was like, because the school is so nice to him. Why wouldn't they just be like, we're going to let you chill for a little bit and then you take the test when you are not overwhelmed, But no, he takes the test and he can't do it. So he runs away in the fit, upset, finds a train, climbs on the train. Whoops, he's joined the circus.
Essentially, yeah. Yeah, so in the film, he says that he just starts walking towards Albany. Doesn't even really say why.
They don't even have that in the book. I think he's just walking and then he's like, train. I saw that scene. Pretty sure it's longer in the movie than in the book.
Really?
Yeah.
Of him getting on the train?
Yeah. He's wandering. In the movie, he's wandering. He puts his feet in a little pool of water so we can get some free Robbie Pat's Tootsies. They're doing all that stuff. In the book, I literally feel like he's like, I ran away. Whoops, train.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so he kind of just stumbles into this train. I don't think has any realization of what it is or where it's going.
No, he does not know what it is.
Just catches a ride on the nearest thing he can.
Yeah, he's just trying to get out and escape.
Yes. And so right away, he's face to face with a group of men on the train.
Yes.
Most notably Camel.
In the book, he is being held by a black man whose name is Blackie.
Oh.
Yes.
Great.
Which is the name of a horse on the trains. Later, you find out.
Oh.
And this is one of my big problems with the book. There are 2 named black characters. One of them shares a name in a horse. The other one has a very similar name to another animal in the book.
Okay.
And those are your 2 black characters.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't love that choice, but I will say Sara Gruen does show the tensions of segregation and racism at the time.
Well, I was going to say, is there any kind of purpose to it? Because it's not necessarily out of the norm for the time period, but it begs the question of, did you need to include it?
Those things, no, especially the second one. I think they could have been. Mm-hmm. Actually, the first one more so could have. Blackie could have been different. I think. Yes, it's a racist nickname that was given to black men, and yes, it's a name that was given to horses, but they didn't have to be the same.
Sure.
The second one, there is one point where you're like, okay, I guess I kind of get it, but I don't think it was worth it for your 2 named black characters to basically share names with 2 animals.
Sure.
But there are scenes where the circus is there's tensions, and Jacob mentions you see the black people leave first because they're the ones these gangs are going to go after first. Uh-huh. So there are mentions of the real racism and consequences and how hard it would have been to be black at the time. But like I said, I think those could have been changed, and we could have, just given these black people an identity
Sure.
that was not tied to an animal.
Well, none of this is in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't even remember if there are any black people in the movie.
I actually wanted to ask you that question.
Certainly not notably.
Yeah.
You know, they're not named characters or anything.
Yeah, and that may have been a purposeful choice in that, like, the black man who grabs Jacob obviously has a racist name. And so you're like, well, and then you don't want your one black character to, like, kind of be this jerk. So you're like, what do we do? There's only 5 characters that are named.
Yeah.
So perhaps
I don't even view something like that as being a jerk. Like, it's just Jacob's an outsider at that point. You know?
That's true. That's true. He is an
But
outsider.
either way, I don't know.
Yeah, he does later on kind of is a little bit of a jerk. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Not present in the movie, so
Yeah.
I have no opinion about that.
But you're right. We meet Camel, which is a white man with an animal's name, with
Yes.
a name of an animal.
Not just a white man, a fellow Pole.
A fellow Pole, is he?
Yeah.
I don't think he's Polish in the
Oh, really?
book. Yeah, there is
okay.
another Polish guy.
Oh, he gets very excited when Jacob tells him his last name is Jankowski.
Yeah. Well, there is Polish love in the book.
Yes,
and
it's actually very important to the story.
it is important to the story, and there is like spoken Polish words. So if you understand Polish, this might be really fun for you to watch or read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically he's just like, well, I'm on the train now. And, you know, Camel is sort of protective of him at the start, you know, just in kind of a nice general way. Mm-hmm. You know, basically just like, hey, we're a circus. I don't know if you know that. Our owner's a little crazy, but I can try to help you get some work if you want it.
Yeah.
So they get to their next stop and start setting up, you know, somewhere outside of town or whatever for the circus. And he helps them set up and then sort of, you know, goes to see if he can continue on his way with them.
Yeah, this is basically like a couple days of him trying to get a job that's like he's going to be able to stay in and not just be kicked out of the circus.
Right, because
But-
at this point he's just like shoveling manure and,
Yeah.
you know, helping put up a tent or something.
Yeah, so in the book, he just shovels manure and then someone finds out he's a vet.
Yes.
And then they kind of, again, he has to go through all these hijinks, but it ends up with him in front of August and Uncle Al in the book. And he's like, well, we lost our vet, so we use a new vet. And Jacob's like, well, I'm not a vet. And they're like, no. This is the circus. You're a vet.
Right, yeah. So there's some elements of that, and they actually do something funny. So we had made the joke earlier about Ringling Brothers. That's one of the first things that is mentioned to Jacob is do not talk about Ringling Brothers
Yes.
to the owner, because this is what the Benzini Brothers, is that the circus
Yeah.
that we're with? So they're, you know, I assume that's a made up name. Like, I don't think that's a real circus.
Yeah, and if it is a real circus, boy, did she destroy their reputation.
Right. So I have to assume it's not real. I didn't actually look that up. But so this is, you know, being presented as like a, you know, their rival companies to Ringling Brothers.
Well, in the book, they're wannabe rivals.
Yes.
In
of
the
course.
book, Ringling is like, they're not even on Ringling's radar.
It's the same, but again, we're seeing this just from the perspective of August.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
In other words, he does not like Ringling Brothers.
Yeah,
That's the point.
absolutely.
So it's funny because at first he's not convinced. He does not care about having a vet.
Oh, really?
They didn't have one before, and he thinks it's not that important. And Jacob says, I bet Ringling Brothers has a vet.
Oh, my God. I love that.
I found that very funny.
That's even better.
It's not like the final thing that makes him, you know, finally cave into it, but it's part of it.
Yes. Well, because that's the whole thing is that, like, oh, Ringling Brothers have an elephant. Like, that's the whole
Right.
thing.
Yeah, so it finally gets him to sort of be like, oh, well, now this is my proud Cornell graduate veterinarian that we have now, you know?
Yeah, and they love talking about how he's a Cornell
Yes.
like graduate, and he keeps being like, I'm not a
So,
Cornell graduate.
Of course, they have to use this as like a point of drama in the movie. It ends up being nothing, but there's like a whole, you know, he goes on his way for quite some time before finally revealing to August that I'm never graduated. I'm not a certified vet.
Interesting.
But then he still says, like, he goes on some tangent about, like, do you think the tattooed woman was born with her tattoos or this or that,
Yeah, he says, so in the book, it's really similar where there's the guy who, it's a tattooed man, and I think they say he was in Borneo, and he was held hostage, and that he was tattooed by the savages, right? And the guy was like, no, he was like a freaking sailor or something like that. And he just tattooed himself.
Exactly.
Like, it's all a facade.
Right. And so that's the ultimate point of, like, do you have the skill to do it? Then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's the difference between, like, he's technically not a vet, but he's done everything.
Right. Can he keep their animals healthy? That's all that really matters.
Exactly.
Again, August has already made clear at this point that they exist in his mind outside the scope of any laws or certifications or this or that, so I don't think he gives a shit about that. He's still a Cornell veterinarian in his eyes.
They really, really love hammering that.
Yes. I mean, he constantly, Christoph Waltz is just calling him, like, Cornell or Cornell boy or this or that.
I love that. And I can imagine, well, I guess I've seen the movie, but I don't remember it. But I can imagine Christopher Waltz saying, like, Cornell boy. I love that.
Yeah. So somewhere in the midst of this is when he meets Marlena. In the movie, it's pretty much like straight away because they want to introduce her, and that's kind of what kicks off the whole conversation about him being a vet, is that he sees her tending to one of the horses and goes and realizes that it's injured and shares this information. Yeah,
so that's like a little bit different from the book. He, like, sees Marlena before he's a vet, and then, like, later on someone's like, well, Marlena's got that lame horse.
Yeah.
And then Marlena's like, yay, there's a vet. And then the horse is lame. And this is a really, really good time to put in a trigger warning for those of you who are sensitive about animals.
Yes.
We are going to talk about animal abuse and animal death.
It is a central point of this story.
Yes.
And even has some, controversy that extended out to the real world.
Really?
A little bit.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. So, again, none of the details of, like, how this unfolds is really important. The point is, he is sort of immediately smitten with Marlena.
He's like, look at those pink sparkles. Look at those legs. Look at those tootsies. Oh, by the way, in the book, Jacob is a redhead, and that's like people keep talking about it. Huh. And there's even like a curtain match the drapes.
Oh my god!
Like someone makes a comment. They don't make that exact comment, but there's like someone says something like that. So like it's a big deal that he's a redhead.
Oh my god, how funny!
Yeah.
So yeah, essentially, like the central point of this, I'm guessing it's very similar in the book, but I don't know for sure, is that he has basically alerted them, like, hey, this horse is injured to a point that can't really be saved.
Yeah, that's a sped up version.
Okay. The kind, just thing to do, my professional opinion as a veterinarian, would be to put down the animal.
In the book, and I think she does this very tactfully and well, but it's really funny. They're like, okay, we have to put the horse down. And how you put a horse down in those days was you shot it. Mm-hmm. Which is, if you do it right, quite humane.
Right.
So August gives him a rifle and 2 bullets. And he hands back one of the bullets. And August is like, what if you miss? And he's like, the horse is lying in straw right now. I'm not going to miss.
Right. So it sounds like there might be a slight difference here, and that this is definitely presented in the film as kind of the first contentious moment between the 3 of them, I guess you would say. And that, so he basically at first doesn't believe him that the injury is severe enough.
Okay.
Marlena is saddened by it, but very quickly comes around to being like, yeah, you're right.
She's a total animal lover and quite reasonable about animals,
yeah, she's very, very clearly, like, really endeared to these animals, you know. Not just an act for her. But yeah, so they, kind of go back and forth a little bit, and then ultimately August tells him not to do it.
Oh.
Because he wants to squeeze 2-3 more shows out of it.
Okay.
Essentially the way, like, the horse is still up and walking.
Oh, it's not walking.
Right. So I think that's the difference. And, so Jacob is kind of like, well, like, yeah, so this is going to get worse. There's nothing I can do to fix it. So it would be better just to end the suffering now. And August is like, but you're saying we have like 2 more weeks. And so his instruction is to leave the horse be and get a couple more performances out of it. So this is, we're going real villain mode real quick here.
Yeah.
To hammer home that August is not a great person.
Yeah. So are August and Marlena married in the novel? Okay. So that's obviously a big thing, is that Marlena's an animal lover and August is clearly not.
Very abusive to them, yeah.
In the book, I think he's so August, like, he's obviously abusive with his wife, Marlena, but he really loves her and he's like obsessed with her.
Yes, that's clear.
So he doesn't he like is like, okay, let's put the horse on rest to see if it recovers for Marlena. And then at a certain point, you're like they were like trucking around this horse that is not going to get better.
Right. So it just becomes a detriment at that point.
Exactly. So not only is it better for the horse because it's not going to heal, but also financially, it's just not worth it anymore. So they don't make the horse perform anymore. But it's their like star horse. It's
an interesting point of difference, but like ultimately doesn't really matter.
No.
Just the point of it is that, they're trying in the film to highlight the way that he views people and animals as a commodity.
It's almost that in the movie they want him to appear cruel, and in the book she's not ready to reveal that he's totally cruel.
Right. Like because you're not fully getting that point, but it is the start of realizing that, like, she is the same difference as the horse, really. Like, yes, he loves her, that's clear, but the way that it becomes increasingly clear to her, in other words, that she's also just a commodity.
I didn't get that vibe in the book.
Really?
Yeah. I got the very, like, abusive relationships are complicated, but I did get the vibe that, like, he cared more for her than the animals.
He does, because, okay, I guess I should say that she is a step above every other living thing for him.
Yes.
But she's still realizing that, like, what is actually the difference between me and anyone else?
Yeah, and I guess part of it is that he doesn't want to deal with Marlena if the horse is being mistreated.
Right.
So there is that element of him being good to the animals because of Marlena and because he doesn't want to put up with that.
Right.
Not just because, I don't want to upset her, but because, I will have to deal with the repercussions.
Correct. Yeah, he doesn't actually care.
Yeah.
It's balancing her being too mad at him.
Yeah, exactly.
And him having to deal with that. But so anyway, ultimately Jacob takes it into his own hands in the movie and shoots the horse anyway.
Yes. So he does it without August's consent in the movie?
Correct. But then August retroactively is like, okay, I was wrong, you made the right call. So it reels it back a little bit.
What do they do with the horse's body in the movie?
I don't know. It's not talked about.
In the book, it is implied that they fed it to the cats.
Oh, well, that could have been some subtext that I didn't quite read into. So there is a whole thing about how they're serving the cats spoiled meat,
which is in the books.
They don't like make it clear that it's the horse at all. I don't know, but that's a very possible implication.
In the book, what's happening is they're going on like a long stretch or something like that, where they have to like pack the whole train full of food and the meat spoils and they're feeding the cats spoiled meat. And then he shoots the horse. And then they're like, what did you do with the horse? And August is like, I'm going to go over there. And Jacob's like, wait, what did you do with the horse? And August is like, did you see the sky today? It's beautiful.
Yeah. So maybe, I'm thinking back, there is a scene where, Jacob had previously commented on the meat being spoiled, that it's not good for the cats. They clearly don't like it.
Yeah.
And then after the horse is shot, August like makes a comment about like, well, I fixed the meat problem.
There you go.
So I don't think I caught on to it, but it's not clearly spelled out, which is actually kind of impressive for that movie.
Yeah, because it's not really, sometimes these movies, it's much like Mission Impossible, where they will reward you for paying attention. They will give you little nuggets.
Right.
And, they will reward you. Not all of those kinds of movies will do that.
No, and increasingly that's not the case.
Exactly. But sometimes movies that you don't expect it from will be like, were you paying attention? Did you notice we fed the horse to the cats?
Which I guess I wasn't super locked in, but
yes. Which is fair.
But yes, it's increasingly of concern in the modern day because of, pretty much everyone is double screening at all times. So, like there's been big news in the past few weeks about how Netflix has specifically told their content makers to like have characters vocally state what's happening.
Oh, goodness.
Because they know that people aren't looking at the screen.
Well, that's
really upsetting.
That's a much bigger problem,
Of course. No, I just mean that's what it makes me think about.
But yeah. Like Water for Elephants, which is this easy watching movie and fairly easy book. Well, maybe easy is not the right word because there's so much animal death and abuse. But it's okay, fine, accessible. Even they snuck a couple little. What do we do with the horse?
That was always used to be the case. I think that's my point. Is that is something you used to get out of even like generic middle of the road studio movies, and now it would never happen.
Yeah, exactly. Now they'd be like, no, say it.
Right.
Say it.
I'm sad right now because my brother died.
Oh boy, these cats sure look hungry. Good thing we have a horse that's dead.
And they hit someone in the ribs while they say
August is like ignoring the question, and in the background you see someone dragging the horse to the cats.
Yes, so it would play a little bit different, but anyway. Ultimately I think that's all the like kind of important setting up for it until we get to, the titular point of the movie.
Which is not cantaloupes.
Talking about the swinging melons.
No. We're talking about Rosie.
Rosie the elephant.
Who, I didn't say it earlier, but is the character that shares the name with, there's a black nurse named Rosemary.
Oh.
And there's even a point where he accidentally is like mumbling Rosie, and then Rosemary is like, my name's not Rosie. And I'm like, okay, I get it, but like, no, she was the only other black character.
Okay, yeah. I got you. At least Rosie was like, very near and dear to their hearts.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, the animals are like, they're not like, well, this is a shitty animal. They're like, we love these. Like, these are wonderful animals. Even the horse, which is for some reason named but doesn't need to be named because it never comes back.
Right.
Like, they like the horses. They're good to the horses. The horses are good to Marlena and Jacob, you know. But, that was just my, like, a little sticking point for me that just made me kind of uncomfortable.
So kind of, I don't know if it's the same in the book, but in the movie, the whole point of this is, like we said, the horse that ends up getting put down was their star attraction.
Yep.
Again, Marlena is kind of their star performer who is always doing stuff with the horses. So they have to pivot, basically. Yes. August starts to become worried. I guess in the book it would be Uncle Al or both of them.
Both of them, yeah.
Become worried that they're about to lose a lot of ticket sales and, how are they going to get by and this and that. So they do have, it very quickly glazes over it, but it seems like maybe a few weeks of difficulty in moving around from place to place and just trying to figure out what to do.
Okay, that's interesting. In the book, it's like the horse dies and then they feed it to the cat. And then there's like a day and then they're like, hey, this circus is collapsing. Let's go there. And then they just go in like 3 days. Like they get there really fast.
Anyway. They go to get an elephant.
Yeah, they go to get an elephant who is supposed to be dumb as a bucket of rocks.
Is that right?
Yes. That's the whole thing.
Well, it's not very clear. So clearly, whoever they're getting it from, I don't even think that they mention it's like a collapsing circus or anything, but this is clearly like a trained elephant.
Yes.
That they have had lots of issues with.
Yes.
That's the implication.
Uncle Al buys it. And by the way, they can't pay a bunch of the people because he buys a freaking elephant and an elephant car, so they throw people off the train.
Yeah, to pay for the elephant. Yeah, again, that's we're out of money. Throw someone off the train.
Yeah,
which is how we have not used the term. It's called red lighting.
It is called red lighting because ideally you'll see a red light, throw them, and that means they're near a town.
Yeah.
And they'll survive, hopefully.
Maybe.
As we learn, they don't always survive.
Well, again, because they're just kind of indiscriminate about it. Like, they'll just throw them into a pole or something, you know?
I think that's mentioned at the beginning, too. Camel's like, well, you hope you don't get thrown into a pole.
Right. Just like you might live. It's probably fine.
Yeah. I do want to actually pause really quickly and mention Kinko.
Yes.
/ Walter. Is he in the movie?
Yeah, he is. He's a big character in the movie, actually.
Well, he's a little character.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. I had to make the joke. And I want to say that last episode, I think we talked about what is the preferred nomenclature. Yes. And I decided to look it up because I knew we were going to talk about it. And it sounds like dwarf, person with dwarfism, little person are kind of all okay right now.
I think it's, again... People are not a monolith. No group is. It's going to come down to personal preference.
Yes.
There's no ill intention.
Yes.
Meant here.
Yes. And I mention that because Walter, also known as Kinko, has dwarfism.
Right. Yes. So he is pretty much who Jacob is thrown into room with. He becomes his roomie.
They don't get along at first.
His name is only Kinko to start with because that is what he's known as to everybody. Only his friends call him Walter.
Exactly. And then, very quickly in the book, too quickly, perhaps, they become friends. It's like a light switch.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I thought that was perfectly paced in the movie.
Oh, good. Because this is where Walter is like, I don't like you. And then he's like, no, I really don't like you. And then he's like, you were looking at my porn magazines? I hate you.
You don't touch a man's pornos.
Yeah. And then he gets the sex workers which is really a questionable scene, to seduce Jacob while he is super drunk, extremely drunk, unable to give consent drunk. And I don't think stuff happens. He vomits on one of them, and then he gets stuffed in a crate.
Right.
And then Walter's like, we're best friends.
Yeah.
You can call me Walter.
I don't remember exactly. Yes, again, I think it's paced well in the movie because it's, everything's condensed a little bit, so it never feels like it's being rushed. Mm-hmm. And we also forgot to mention Walter's near and dear friend.
Queenie. She's a Jack Russell Terrier, I think.
Who also does not like Jacob at first.
Also switches like a light switch.
Yeah.
Which I will allow because dogs sometimes mirror their owners.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's you can tell when your owner, they seem to be able to tell when their owner trusts someone or not.
Yeah, and they're like bosom buddies.
Right, always together, best friends.
Yeah.
So basically it's the same in the movie. It's just a little more lighthearted, it sounds like, which again sometimes is just the advantage of a visual medium, is that they're not having to describe it in much detail. You just sort of see them partying together.
Yeah.
But that's it. So at this point he started working with the elephant, he's, got a set job, right?
Yes.
So he's starting to gain trust of everyone around anyway.
Yeah, Jacob is, yeah.
Yeah. So, at some point, he goes to dinner and starts drinking with August and Marlena, I think.
Yeah.
And these details don't matter too much, but and then, continues the party with the rest of the crew, all the rest of the performers, and then that's so they have a great night together. Mm-hmm. There's no sort of, it's implied that they're all sort of hanging out with the sex workers and this and that, but it never feels, shifty or anything.
Yeah, no, this one, it gets I was like, ooh, this is a little icky. I don't like it.
And I think that's just the curse of having to describe it. It makes you think about it.
I think also, I would put a sexual assault trigger warning on the book.
Is it really that bad?
It's just one of those like questionable consent moments where you're like, he is so drunk, you know, and like he's never like saying no or pushing anyone away, but he's like clearly overwhelmed and a little uncomfortable, but also aroused. And then they describe his penis a lot, actually.
These are fascinating points to this book.
Yeah. I think he describes it as like a little pink worm when it's flaccid because he can't get hard anymore. But yeah, his penis gets described. But it's, you know, it's just one of those scenes that you're like, oh, it's a little like...
You're telling me that a true adaptation would have had Robbie Pat's hanging dong?
Yeah.
And we did not get that.
Yeah.
What is this PG-13 bullshit?
You know what? I'm going to say it. We're going to cut the episode right here. Book is better than the movie.
There's no dong.
There's quite a bit of nudity in the book, which is, as you're probably getting, that's why it was banned from schools. Yeah. And that's one of those things that I was like, if I was a high school librarian, I might not put Water for Elephants in there for teenagers.
I guess, yeah.
But like... Yeah, it's, you know, it's not something that needs to be on a list that's banned.
Well, yes, and I forgot to mention that some of the other books that were banned, which, like, make sense in some cases. I don't know if you saw the list.
I did not see the list.
Oh, I pulled up the list because I was very curious.
All right, tell me.
So we have some that make sense, like Slaughterhouse-Five.
Okay, yeah.
Which, like, my school, they use that in the curriculum. So
really?
I had transferred schools, so I didn't end up doing it. I was past that point in English. But yeah, they would use it in the school I went to, which is public school.
Yeah.
And then A Clockwork Orange.
Fair.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Even though, again, I think there's teachable things in that content. But, like, I get not wanting to mess with it, I guess.
Yeah.
Wicked?
Okay.
They banned Wicked?
Oh my gosh.
I don't know why. It doesn't list reasons for any of this stuff. It just had a date and the book. Anyway, so I don't know what the hell they're doing down there in Texas. I can't say I'm surprised, but it's just bizarre. It's like, what is it just that the term banned is thrown about, or is that like literal, you know, because you can choose not to include something in your library. That doesn't mean it's banned.
So because it's like all these schools can't have it, it's like a list of
because it's the upper schools. It's not the librarians deciding.
No,
it's the upper.
It's it's like some council for like a lot of schools. I can't tell you. I can't remember how many, but it's like a lot of schools.
Right. I didn't look it up, but
and really none of them can put it on their shelves. It is not a librarian curating a library and saying like, you know, this is of value to our collection. This will be borrowed. If you look up, most libraries have a curation like list, like rules. Mm-hmm. And Wicked would definitely fall under like, you would put that in there because it's so popular. You know what I mean? But like, you could see that like maybe they wouldn't want to include books on like self-harm or like, you know, like those kinds of
No, there were
things.
stuff on the list that made sense. I mean, we also had just like, I didn't write any of these down, but there were books with titles like, you know, Am I Gay or something, you know, which of course Texas would ban those, but anyway, I don't know. It's just bizarre. I can't imagine why they banned Wicked. I really just don't understand it. Maybe someone high head honcho there is like a huge Wizard of Oz fan and is like, that trash ruins it.
That trash garbage.
So I don't know. I just found that really, really funny. I had to go check out that list, but anyway. So the point is that, you know, so we're going through all these things, and I think this is the part we're just going to skip over a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, Jacob has endeared himself to the performers. He's BFFs with Walter and Queenie now.
He and Marlena are getting closer.
I also wanted to give a shout out to the dog that performs as Queenie.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Uggy. Uggy. Who also was famously featured in the movie The Artist.
The Artist.
Yeah.
Because Uggy is an artist himself. And was he a Jack Russell?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Those are wild dogs.
Yeah.
But very good for these kinds of things.
No, perfect for this character.
Yes, absolutely. And like Walter is constantly training Queenie tricks and like all that. Like they're perfect together.
It's a funny little duo, yeah. And then during this point, so we now have, Rosie is entering as their new star attraction. At least that's the hope. I'll get there.
Okay.
And so basically what's decided is that, Marlena will continue being kind of the big showy performer with Rosie, and that Jacob will be the trainer, essentially.
Yeah, they're basically like, we don't know what to do with an elephant. Jacob, here you go.
Yeah, but he never actually does much in terms of being a vet outside of the horse.
Oh, in the book he actually does.
Does he? Okay.
Yeah, there's a giraffe that has like, I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically like a sore throat.
That must suck for a giraffe.
Yeah, that's a lot of throat. And he has to like climb up on a ladder and like wrap its neck and like feed it like these balms or whatever.
Oh, how
like,
funny.
Concoctions. And it has like pus coming out of its nose and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And so he like has to take care of the giraffe.
Oh, well, that's funny.
Which, how do you transport a giraffe on a train? Do you just have it on?
You leave its head sticking out the top.
I guess so.
And hope it doesn't hit a tree branch.
Yeah, like you have to have it on an open, like you're going through like a tunnel, and so you have to like bring the giraffe in. Someone has to get out and walk around the tunnel with the giraffe.
Yeah, I think we should get deeper into the logistics of transporting giraffes.
Yeah, that'll be a bonus episode.
Anyway, so obviously with the two of them paired up, this is also where the relationship starts to bloom between Marlena and Jacob.
Yes.
I don't know if it's paced out the same way in the book, but this is just, it's essentially, again, many different events occur, little moments between them, but it's essentially just like Jacob is really kind and empathetic and is on the same level as her in terms of animal love and, just kind of not being a cruel person. And so it just further...
The bar is so
low. But it just, more and more highlights that, he is kind and empathetic and August is not. And that she obviously starts to, pay some attention to that.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know what they saw in each other in the book.
Well, so that part did not really come across?
I mean, you're like, it's one of those books where you're like, he sees Marlena and you're like, yeah, they're gonna do something.
But they have some moments of tenderness. I don't think it works in the movie necessarily, but it, like, as far as, like, the design of the script goes, it makes sense.
Yeah, I just didn't, like, feel compelled by their relationship.
Oh, well, maybe it wasn't such a miscast at all then.
Yeah.
Because that's the main complaint of the movie is that there's just not a lot of chemistry between them.
Yeah. I mean, this is just not the kind of movie Robert Pattinson should be doing.
No, not really.
This feels like one of those ones where his agent was like, this is going to make you money. And it was like, this is the guy who highlighted all the times Edward frowned in Twilight and sent it to the crew. So I don't think this is like a Robert Pattinson movie.
Again, this is, like I described it earlier, this is kind of that in-between period for him where he hasn't fully gotten his feet under him.
Yeah.
Thank God he would go on to, do things like The Lighthouse and even Mickey 17.
Yeah.
Some of these more fun ones. It's a little different.
I don't know. I haven't seen the Batman, but
oh, it's just, they just went full brood with it.
Okay.
Basically.
I mean, that's honestly good for him.
He's good at brooding.
He likes doing that kind of stuff.
He wears eyeliner. It's a whole thing,
Yeah.
But anyway. So it's just like a string of these small moments between them where we see August's cruelty and his kindness and blah, blah, blah.
This is where montages are so valuable in
So
film.
valuable.
Where you can have him like petting a horse and then they like catch eyes.
Yeah.
Or like her hand accidentally brushes his. You know what I mean? Or he's smiling and watching her. You know what or they clink glasses.
Something, yeah.
There's so many
stuff.
little things you can do in movies and just make it a montage.
Yeah.
And in a book, we don't do montages really.
No.
Like
you can sort of
Yeah.
detail like a passage of time and what happened in it, but
but not like it just doesn't work.
it doesn't.
You know,
it doesn't
and
work the same way.
It just didn't land for me that like that their relationship was like growing and blooming and becoming this wonderful thing. And I just was kind of like, well, I don't know, like they're the two hot characters, like, you know, and I didn't feel like that's something I always comment about when I'm beta reading is I'm like, I want to feel this moment. And I'm really surprised that like with the old man and like, or old Jacob at 93, how I was like torn apart by that. And then this romance was just like, bleh.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like happenstance, I guess.
Yeah, and I freaking love. Like, I know I'm a big horror girly and like all this stuff, but like you put romance in something and I am there.
Yeah.
I love romance.
You have a soft spot for sure.
I do. And like a circus, what a great backdrop.
I know.
The Prohibition, love that era. And then it just didn't land for me. So I think
I'm surprised it didn't work in the book. Again, I assume that was just some of because again, like the background script in the movie, it's like it's checking the boxes of okay, we're doing the romance thing, you know.
Yeah.
But again, it was like the on-screen chemistry between them wasn't palpable
there.
at all.
Yeah.
You know. And again, individually they're doing fine. It's not like either of them are bad actors, but
They
like
just
what,
don't.
I don't know what either of them are doing in this movie, frankly.
That's what I was like. Why? I mean, I get why Robert Pattinson was cast. I'm not sure why Reese Witherspoon was
Right,
cast.
like she's already cemented as an actor. Like, who was her agent? Like, what were you doing?
She could be doing much better. And something I'm curious about, what she has to be like acrobatic? Like, does she do anything in the film?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's, hanging on things and flipping around and doing this and that.
Okay, because the only thing I saw her do was lie on top of a horse, and I was like, good job.
No.
Oh my gosh, in the book, Jacob Jankowski is constantly like, and Marlena was pointing her little toes, and there she is pointing her toes, and
feet guy, huh?
her pink slippers pointing her toes.
I did notice you mentioned Tootsies a lot,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking, is that the movie is the great equalizer. We get Robert Pattinson's Tootsies because they knew that we can't just do lady Tootsies.
Yeah.
We got to do boy Tootsies, too.
Wow.
So we got Jacob Jankowski's feet.
Amazing.
Because we got a lot of Marlena's little pointed feet, pointed toes. The other thing, this is where I'm going to start maybe ripping into this a little bit more, because as I said, I did not love this story and I was gushing about it earlier. Oh my gosh, if I have to read the phrase arms akimbo one more time.
Huh?
Arms akimbo is you have your hands on your hips and your elbows out. Which
That's
most
what
people,
that is?
Yeah, most people just say he had his hands on his hips.
Right.
And multiple times this book says arms akimbo. And it's such a distinct word that it doesn't work when it's repeated that much.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's one of those things that you'd see once and be like, oh,
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And I was literally like, why do you keep saying
And then
this?
you use it 3 times and it's like, oh, okay, I'm glad you learned a new word this week. Can
That's,
we move
yeah,
on?
that's kind of what it feels like.
It's like that, what was that book you put down because
Oh my
it said
God.
viscera like 4 times in one page?
It was, I can't remember what the book, you know what, I'm not going to call it out anyway.
No,
I'm
no.
not going to do that to them.
No, don't
but
do it,
there
but-
was a book and it said viscera. I think it was 3 times in like 2 paragraphs,
Yeah.
which is almost worse than 4 times on one page.
That's really rough.
And I was like in the first chapter and I was like, nope, this is not for me.
Okay, so Rosie
Our girl Rosie the elephant.
So she is, at first being just as obstinate as her former owner made it sound like she was.
Yeah, he was like, this was a bad investment, y'all.
Yeah.
She dumb.
So, like, they try a performance, and she's not really listening to any commands, and, it's sort of implied that it's almost a dangerous incident, right? Like, she starts to, not stampede or anything, but, like, she's upset and just not listening, and she gets, like, way too close to the stands, and August starts poking her, which makes her, like, rear up, and,
They don't have that in the book.
Okay.
They're just like, we can't get her to do anything, and they're like, we gotta train her and make her have a routine.
Right.
And they're like, well, until then, we're going to have her stay in the menagerie, which is where all the animals are. And like guests can walk through the menagerie and see them. And she'll take candy and gum and like eat and be there and be cute.
Oh, okay.
And then she doesn't do anything in the actual circus. And people are kind of like, why is there an elephant on your poster if it's just stealing my candy?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what it is. People are like, that's kind of disappointing.
Again, this is a positive thing about a movie. They can show all that in 5 seconds with this scene.
Yep.
So that's where we're at. And basically, just to get to the point, this is why it also is like interesting that Camel is Polish in the movie.
Yes, and I'm guessing that he's replacing the other Polish character in the book.
Oh, presumably, yeah. Well, that's another thing is that as far as I maybe understood it, there's like 2 or 3 like very small moments where Uncle Al is like helpful to Jacob and this and that.
Yeah, he has his moments.
And so I think that Camel is the one that gets most of those markers. So it's mostly that he's rolled into August, but like a touch here and there to Camel.
Yeah.
Because Camel basically just remains like kind of his friend and mentor throughout. So one day they're with Rosie. This is kind of after August has a big blowout after that moment.
Yeah.
So he has like a big temper tantrum and goes and beats the hell out of Rosie.
Which he's very good at.
Very good at beating animals.
A few times.
Yep. Again, like, I don't know how much this happens. There's probably some back and forth, I assume. But in this, it's after that big incident. It's clearly like it almost posed a danger, which is going to cut into his bottom line.
Yeah. So there was an incident in the book where she runs away. I don't think she was performing, though.
Okay.
But I can't remember.
Yeah, that's kind of the same in the movie. Like she ends up running out of the tent after that, and they kind of like play it off as it was on purpose or something, you know, because nothing actually happened. But anyway, so immediately after that, they go and wrangle up Rosie and put her back in her cage, and he goes and beats the living hell out of her. Obviously upsets both Jacob and Marlena a lot. So Jacob goes back in there to comfort Rosie and tend to her wounds and this and that. And Camel is there, and they say something in Polish, and she responds.
Oh.
And so that is when they sort of are like, huh, that's interesting. And so they start saying more Polish to her, and she continues to respond. And so he starts giving like actual commands in Polish, and she does it.
That's better.
Is it?
Yeah. Because in the book, so early on you hear a guy saying a prayer in Polish, and then you don't hear anything in Polish for a really long time. And then they go to get the Rosie back, and there's Jacob, and there's like one other guy, and the other guy is speaking to her in Polish. And Jacob's like, what the heck? She knows Polish. And the other guy's like, yeah.
Oh. Okay.
And it's like, you're telling me this guy who has been traveling with them knows the elephant understands Polish
and said nothing
and has told no one.
Yeah, that's
not
lame.
even the vet.
That's really lame.
Yeah.
The Polish vet.
He doesn't know the vet's Polish at the time.
His name is Jankowski.
They don't know each other very well.
Okay.
Like, I think this is like the first time you're meeting this guy.
All
and
right.
what actually is kind of cool is that this guy is speaking Polish, and then Jacob's like, whoa. And the guy's like, what, you gonna be racist now? And Jacob's like, no, I'm Polish. And then they realize, so I guess there's that element of like, well, he doesn't want people to be racist, but like you're saying prayers in Polish on the train. So everyone knows who you are.
Yeah, I think I like the movie's version of that better.
I like it more too, where it's like a discovery. It's not just like, it's like Deus Ex Machina in the book, where like, well, I made the elephant dumb and I don't know what to do. Right. Oh, it speaks Polish. And someone knows that. Here you go.
So I'm assuming that no one at the previous circus spoke Polish, and maybe that was their problem. I don't know.
Guess.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. So this becomes the key.
Yes.
And they are actually able to perform with her now. She listens. August learns some Polish commands, and then he is able to continue being the ringmaster or whatever. And
yeah.
It works out with her.
And it's kind of like a funny thing in the book where Jacob Jankowski is like, his Polish is really bad, and it's like funny to listen to him speak Polish. Yeah, I thought that was a really sweet touch. But thinking of the actors, Christopher Waltz is probably more likely to know Christoph Waltz, sorry, is more likely to know Polish than Robert Pattinson in real life.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think either of them had particularly good pronunciation.
Yeah. And I guess this is a good time to mention you were in Poland for a while. So you do not speak Polish.
No.
But you've heard it. You are familiar with the language. And if you feel like they have not very good pronunciation, maybe if you're Polish, just read the book and don't watch the movie.
I mean, it doesn't matter that much. But I mean, obviously, Christoph Waltz is like on purpose, right? But
yeah, his should be bad.
Because he doesn't know it as his character.
Yeah, his should be bad.
Yeah, but basically, so there's just this whole, again, kind of stretch where the details don't matter, but they're starting to have some success, and they're all getting along pretty well. And
Jacob and Marlena are getting closer.
They're getting closer. Yeah, I didn't mention, I briefly touched on that they had a scene where they had, like, dinner together right before he goes and endears himself to the rest of the crew. But what happened earlier in that evening is that the three of them had had dinner, and then they start drinking afterwards. And so August gets very drunk, and he doesn't get like violent or anything, but like you can see that Marlena knows it's coming because she knows his kind of cruel nature and this and that. He's still being pretty playful, but just getting a little belligerent.
And getting in the book, he gets like silent and weird, but it's super similar. And she's like, Augie, are you okay? Are you back? Yeah.
So she basically is like, okay, I'm going to take you to bed now. And so she goes and lies him down and shuts the door, and everything's fine. And so she's like, Jacob's like, oh, I should probably go, whatever. And she's like, dance with me one song, And so they share a dance and have like another moment of tenderness. And it's very clear that they want to kiss each other, but they don't.
Okay. I think there's like a raid on a bar.
That's later in the movie, but yeah.
Okay, I think that's the only time they dance together in the book.
Okay. So this occurs again just before all of the like success with the elephant, and then the raid happens just after what we just talked about.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And the raid is basically that they're at a speakeasy, and they're dancing and they're having a good time, and then
all three of them are there.
August, Marlena, and Jacob are all there. Augie. And they're dancing, having a good time. Marlena's dancing with August, and then August goes off to get like a drink or something, and Marlena loves the song that's playing suddenly, so she makes Jacob dance with her.
Okay.
And then August is like looking at them in the distance, all jealous. And I'm like, Marlena, you know that he's protective of you.
Yeah.
You know he's weird. You know about his problems. Why are you doing this to Jacob?
Because she also is like trying not to, like, she's trying to still be normal about it, she's not admitting to any feelings or anything like this, so this is all her still doing what she's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Quote unquote. And you're right. Like, what part of that would work out for knowing who August is as a person,
And I will say that, like, there may be the argument, like, she heard the song, she just wanted to have fun, she wasn't thinking about August. When you are in that abusive of a relationship, you are constantly thinking about that person.
Right. That it just doesn't make sense as a character thing.
Yeah.
Because she would always, like, in the same way that the movie actually captured it well with her realizing he was getting too drunk and belligerent.
Yes.
Like, that's a good touch for how she would respond to things. Mm-hmm. But then it doesn't apply it to the rest. You know?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. In other words, we're not implying that she did anything wrong.
No.
Just that her character would probably know better.
It doesn't make sense for her character to do these things. So, I just, especially like like in the bar, dancing while he's there. Like, it's one thing if he passes out and you close the door. Yeah. But, like, he's just stepped away. Mm-hmm. You know he's coming back. Right. Like, that's just, that to me, that just is not how abusive relationship dynamics work. Right. Which might be reflective of Sara Gruen not being familiar with abusive relationships. And I'm going to hope that's the case and say wonderful.
Yeah, it's just a little, it doesn't completely work for the characters. But,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so essentially that's the same thing that happens in the movie. So I guess we just get that little touch of it earlier on. Yes. But it's to say, this is when you, again, so August wouldn't have seen that first case, but now at this party he does. Yeah. You start to see the jealousy forming and them getting closer and closer. So yeah, the raid happens. The two of them kind of get separated from him.
From August.
August. And so then they're like kind of hiding from the police, and that's when they finally kiss.
Yep, that's the same. And it's just like a big old smooch, and then they're like, oh shit. And then Marlena's like, okay, bye.
Yeah, so
walk away really quickly.
Yeah, she clearly like feels guilty right away and runs away. Yeah. And then in the movie, he considers leaving the circus at that point.
Yeah, I think there's like, especially as we build to the end, there's a lot of moments of him being like, I'm going to leave, because things are just getting worse. He knows he has feelings for Marlena. From this point on, he and August have increased tension because August knows that they escaped together. Right. And he's like, well, how interesting that we got separated.
Yeah. Sure. I think that Jacob, like, it seems to be implied that he wants to run away out of a sense of like shame and embarrassment, but also just like he assumes that the way she responded, that she was probably going to tell August what happened. And ultimately the next day he finds out that she didn't. Yeah. Obviously he had already seen and was suspicious of some things, but in terms of her story, she's like, oh, we just, got lost and then we managed to make it home.
Yeah. You know, something else that's really interesting is I know that August is kind of keeping Marlena in a bubble for some of these respects. Like in the book, she doesn't know people are being thrown off the train and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she is unaware of maybe that's also Uncle Al. That's not August.
Right. It gets a little muddled.
She is a little bit in a bubble, but people are literally like, from the like first time she sees Marlena, they're like, don't mess with August's wife. Yeah. And you would think she would know that. There was like something there. And that like people have literally been beaten up because of this.
Yeah.
So this has happened before. Mm-hmm. Which makes it, to me, even more weird that she would dance in front of August.
Yeah, well, that's like that detail, yeah. Like, it makes sense that she would still fall for somebody.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. Especially when she finds someone like kind who's willing to stick up for her and do the things she likes to do and care for. Like, they have some similarities evidently, but like it doesn't make sense that she would make decisions in front of August that would put her and or the other person in danger.
Yeah. Okay, so these things go along. Something else that happens, at least in the movie during this point, is that Campbell becomes sick. Yep. So he has, for years, they find out, been drinking this, like, some sort of ginger extract.
It's called Jake.
It's called Jake.
It's Jamaican ginger extract.
It essentially sounds like you're drinking vanilla extract to get drunk.
It does sound like that.
Clearly not good for you.
The fun thing is it can cause paralysis.
Right, and which happens.
This is real, yeah.
Yeah, so he basically wakes up one morning and is like, I can't feel my arms or legs. Yeah. And so that develops into a bit of an issue.
Yeah. So they're like protecting him and keeping him safe. He and Walter. Jacob and Walter.
And it all just sort of like culminates into kind of like a blowout thing between August, Marlena, and Jacob. Where he, in the movie, they don't even have any like further scenes of tenderness or anything, but it's clear that he's been kind of thinking through things and, some of the things that we mentioned that he had already seen. And so he's pretty much confronts them directly about it.
So
he starts to mess with them a little bit,
Oh. In the book, they're kind of like, they've had a moment where they're like, great, we have feelings for each other. This is bad. But then they kind of put it aside and they're able to be friends.
Yeah, that's essentially what happens.
And
but he doesn't put it aside. August does not put it aside.
Oh, yeah. But then they bring freaking Rosie into August and Marlena's tent. And then are like ready to celebrate with August to be like, it was her first show. But August interprets it as the two of them were doing something. Even though there's like 3 glasses, 3 place settings, everything. He just like loses his mind.
Oh.
And he and Jacob just like beat the ever-loving crap out of each other. And then Jacob gets like hauled out of there or whatever. And then you don't see it, but you hear that he hits Marlena.
Yeah.
And then later on you see it.
Right.
See her with a bruise.
Yeah. So yeah, this is essentially the falling out point. There's no coming back from this for Jacob. He's definitely at least fired at this point.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you need to hide or not be
right.
here.
So he's now like, okay, what's going to happen to me kind of thing. So he basically runs away.
No. He just hides.
Okay. No, in the movie, he and Marlena run away.
No.
He's like, I'm going to leave, and then he convinces her to come with him.
They're planning on running away. It's actually quite a while because... yes, I'm sure they're planning on running away. Because Camel is sick, and they don't want to leave Camel. And so they call one of his sons and say, hey, will you pick him up at this stop, which is like a week away. Mm-hmm. So they are slowly planning to run away together.
Okay.
But they don't manage to.
Again, I think it's just the fact that this is all condensed really closely in the movie.
Yeah.
So they just sort of pack everything together. So they just run away to a hotel, and then they plan on moving on from there after this event. That's where they end up having sex.
Okay.
And then August's men, they're like, okay, we're going to head to this place in the morning, catch the next bus or whatever. And August's men bust into the hotel room.
Yeah, this is where it's different because Uncle Al is present in the movie or in the book. And he's like, we got to get Marlena and August back together and make it peaceful.
Okay.
And they send her to a hotel.
Oh, okay.
And Uncle Al is saying, August, you can't go bug her. Mm-hmm. And August does try to go find her, but it's not a big deal. And they don't pull her out. And like Jacob does go with her to like take her bag or something. And he like checks on her once, but they don't run away. They do have sex in the hotel, which is like totally not a romantic moment, in my opinion. Like it just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
But it's. They don't run away.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not until the ending where, things are just falling apart at this point.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Camel and Walter have been red lighted while Jacob was like climbing through the train and he was about to kill August.
Right. So that's what happened it's basically the same, just with some minor details different. So when they break into the hotel room, they take Marlena back and she kind of just, acts like everything's fine.
Okay. Yeah. So she goes back on her own because she's like, I'm performing tonight.
Right. Okay.
So
and then they beat the shit out of Jacob again and then just leave him, which I was kind of surprised that they just left him. I don't know. But anyway, that's the same. Then at that point, he goes back on the train and like breaks into August's room and is about to stab him.
Yep.
I guess it sounds like he just decides against it.
Yeah, he has like a moment of like, I can't do this.
In the movie, he locks eyes with Marlena and she's like, don't do it. And then he stops.
She's not in the room.
Right. I assume that.
Yeah.
Again, none of that matters.
Yeah.
But yeah, so essentially this is just like it's implied heavily that because Camel and Walter were red lighted, the same was probably going to happen to Jacob.
Yeah. In fact, they think he's the one they were looking for.
Yeah. And then there's also a group of others that were red lighted at the same time.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that like they find that Camel has been killed.
And Walter was severely injured and probably dead.
Right. And so that's kind of the last straw for a bunch of people.
Yeah. Queenie survives.
Queenie does survive. Don't worry.
Yeah.
The dog survives.
Queenie survives.
But yeah, so this is like a breaking point, not just for Jacob and Marlena and everybody, like the whole crew of performers, basically.
Everyone, yeah.
Yeah, so they essentially decide that during the next performance, they're going to open all the animal cages.
Yeah, and they whip these animals into a frenzy.
Yeah.
And there's a literal stampede.
Yeah, so they purposefully start a stampede during the show.
Yeah. Rosie kills August.
Puts a damn, like, stake through his head,
yeah,
basically.
The stake that's chaining her to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
She pulls it up, puts it in his head, and then puts it back in the ground.
Yeah, and this is, in the movie, he is strangling Marlena during this.
Oh, he's just yelling at her in the book.
Yeah, no, he is, had his hands around her throat for some amount of time.
Oh my
She
gosh.
is very close to dying, I believe.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, Rosie shoves that straight through his head.
And you know what? Regardless of what August is doing, he deserved it.
Of course.
Yeah.
I like that Rosie gets to be the one that does it.
I think it's a really interesting touch because it goes from this like, oh, this animal's so dumb to like, this animal's family.
Yeah, exactly.
And she cares.
And then, so August's body is like further trampled throughout the stampede, which seems to kind of, it makes it not entirely obvious what happened.
Yeah.
Jacob and Marlena are the only ones that know what happened to him, but they don't say anything.
Marlena doesn't know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's not looking at him when it
Okay.
happens.
Yeah.
So Jacob never tells her.
Oh, I like that.
That's like a point in the book that he's like, I never told her about what Rosie did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they only kind of discuss it as like they're not going to tell anyone else.
Which is fair.
Yeah, and that's pretty much where it ends.
Yeah.
At least in terms of like the day-to-day story of being, remembered. So then it just, I think this is the point where it goes back to the present time of him as an old man. And, he basically just gives the, like, kind of end of movie synopsis of, like, we lived a whole life and we, got married and
pumped out babies.
He went and finished his degree and became a licensed veterinarian. And they, I think it's like there's some minor differences. Like I think they end up in Chicago in the book, but they end up in Albany in the movie. Doesn't matter.
Heck if I remember it. Yeah, the book, I thought the ending was a little belabored when they like young Jacob's ending.
Yeah.
Because it's like there's a little bit of this back and forth of like, oh, is this going to work out? Is this going to work out? And we're like, we're at the wrap up point.
Yeah.
So it took a little bit of while, but it's basically exactly the same. It's the same.
For all intents and purposes, yeah. They had 5 kids. They lived a whole life together. They kept Rosie, like, with them.
Yep, they kept Rosie, the horses.
Yep.
Because they go to Ringling.
Yeah, they end up working.
And then they go to the zoo, and then, they've kept all the animals. And I'm guessing Rosie is still alive to this day.
Oh. Okay.
They never mention her dying, I
Really?
don't think. So I'm just going to say she's alive.
Okay, no, in the movie they explicitly say that she died at some point before both of them, and then Marlena died like a few years before the current time.
Yeah, something like that is the same in the book.
And that's basically when he got put in the home.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the same. Is that she dies and then he gets put in the home.
Yeah.
Does he run away to the circus in the movie?
Yes.
Okay, so the ending is the same where they're like, we're going to run away.
Yeah. So again, he's been detailing this whole story. Again, I think that's the difference is that you don't meet Charles. Is that his name? He's
Heck if I remember.
the new owner of whatever circus that's in town.
Yeah.
So again, he is like from the first scene of the movie, like he's the one that's having this story detailed to him.
Yeah.
And then he's essentially like, well, I don't want to go back to the home, so can I just like hang out with you?
Yeah. And he's like, okay, let's go. You're sure about this? All right, let's go.
And then he says like, oh, you want to run away to the circus, which is obviously a very old trope.
Yeah.
And then he says, I'm not running away, I'm coming home.
Oh my gosh, that's so cheesy. That's not in the book. That's so cheesy.
And there it ends.
One thing I want to say is the title "Water for Elephants."
Yes,
they say it like twice in the book.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically like a joke because it's like, what are you gonna do? Carry water for the elephants? Elephants drink like 26 gallons of water a day.
Right.
You don't carry water for elephants.
You're holding like a full tank of like a vat on the train.
So I don't entirely understand why the book is called that, other than like it's a good title. But that's where the title comes from.
I would never question the title on its own, but then when you like know why it's called that, it's like, okay.
You're like, what does that have to do with the rest of the book?
Yeah, I don't know.
And it almost makes you want more of the book to be about the elephant.
Well, I was going to ask because Rosie is a very central feature in the, for the time that she's part of the story.
It's like the second half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they spend much time with her in the book?
I mean, yeah, they do.
Okay.
But like, there's one elephant in the second half of the book, and the focal point is the romance.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to call it Water for Elephants?
Plural elephants.
Yeah.
There should have been a whole herd of elephants.
First off, there's no water for the elephants in the book. Secondly, it's elephant. It's water for elephant. And really what it is Polish for elephant.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. But anyway. So on the subject of Rosie the elephant.
Yes.
So in the movie, she was played by an elephant named Tai.
Tai.
From Thailand.
From Thailand, okay.
There was some small amount of controversy. I am not going to share an opinion on whether I think it was founded or not, because it seems as though a lot of animal rights organizations just kind of attacked it straight out of the gate without any evidence.
Okay.
And then it maybe turns out that this company, they're called Have Trunk Will Travel.
Oh, okay.
Great name.
That's a really good name.
That managed Rosie and was kind of her handler. Mm-hmm. Or Tai, I should say.
Yeah.
That they had a few little incidents throughout the years, and that it's probably just more that those standards needed to be updated.
Yeah. Rather
than them being, particularly culpable of abuse or anything.
Okay.
So it's questionable, and that Tai had been captured from the wild and put into captivity, and I don't think they're the ones that did that, but they purchased her and kept her, and there was just some concern about if she was being treated well.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, you have these animal rights organizations bringing up these pictures from the movie and this and that, and it's this is a digital effect. This is not real.
Yeah, they didn't.
So you're all stupid? I don't,
They didn't cut the elephant open for this.
Yes.
I would say, and I don't know if it actually happens, but it's Reese Witherspoon ride the elephant. So that's probably their biggest transgression.
Right, and that's the company, they would use Tai outside of movies. She was in a bunch of movies, but they would also use her for elephant rides and stuff.
Yeah, so if you don't know, elephant rides are actually extremely bad for elephants' backs because of the way their spines are made. Mm-hmm. People didn't know that.
Right, it was a standard of the industry for a long time.
So really the group should be no, you can't ride an elephant. But
this is what always happens with any of these groups, is it just goes so far overboard or outside the realm of reality. So that's why I'm there probably are some very valid criticisms of the company and how they handled animals, but none of the actual events of protests or anything were of any substance.
Yeah, showing the elephant beaten up is no, that's an effect for the movie.
Right, you're stupid.
I bet, and especially if they brought the elephant to the United States or had an American crew, chances are they were treating the elephant really well because Americans very love animals, So
yeah, and they didn't film this anywhere else.
Yeah.
This was filmed in Ventura, California, Georgia, and Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Yeah, so the elephant was probably treated pretty well.
Yeah.
There are obviously we've grown a lot, learned a lot since then, but yeah, I don't have an opinion either. I wasn't really.
I don't understand why it has to be that way. I'm so pro animal rights and
but you
treatment
can't
and
use,
so anti PETA. You
can't use fake images and you can't accuse people of things they didn't do. It's just not going to progress the conversation.
Yeah, it's just stupid.
It's just absolutely not.
But I wanted to also alert you that Ty has passed away.
Oh.
But lived a very full life.
Clearly.
Died just a few years ago, I think 2021, at the ripe old age of 53.
53.
Yeah.
Oh, Ty. I hope.
And she was in all kinds of movies and stuff, including making an appearance in the Britney Spears music video for Circus.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, I hope, because I'm seeing she had a long career, I'm hoping that means that she was generally well cared for and,
Yeah, I don't think she was, beaten or anything.
Yeah.
Just, maybe some questionable things that we've learned better of in the meantime.
Things we just know better now and everything. But changing the subject, I actually know someone or met someone who was in the movie. Mm-hmm. I was in Hawaii, and I actually had quite a dramatic meeting where I was sitting at the edge of a pool, and this quite attractive man swims up, pulls himself out of the pool in that classic way. I am not kidding. Plops himself down next to me.
Oh, boy.
And we have a conversation. It turns out he's an actor, and his name is Chris Rubio. I looked him up when we first said we were going to do this, and his IMDb page was his photos and everything. Since then, I've noticed the photos are gone. So I'm not sure if he has decided not to act or not.
What? That's been in the course of a month.
Yeah, that's been in that's literally been a month. It's
very strange.
Weird timing.
That might just be a site thing.
It might be a site thing, but his name is Chris Rubio. He was an extra. I don't know. I've never actually seen him in the movie. I did look a little bit.
You said he was one of the Cornell classmates or something.
He's credited as one of Jacob's Cornell friends.
Yeah, just the really small role. I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know who he was either.
Yeah, but he was a super nice guy. I remember walking up from the beach once, and he came running out of nowhere, maybe a little bit tipsy, and he's so excited, and he just goes, "Oh my gosh, the hot tub is running." And then he runs back to the hot tub. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to the hot tub. So I just wanted to share that and say that he was a really nice guy. And I hope he's doing really well. Mm-hmm. And if he's not acting anymore, I hope he's doing really great in whatever he's doing. But yeah, I did meet someone who was in this movie.
What a story.
What a story.
Well, I think that's about all we got.
You don't have anything else you want to share?
I got nothing else.
I think we actually got more out of this than we thought we would.
Yeah, there's always something to talk about.
There really is.
And we love tangents.
We do. But that must sum up our thoughts, which means that it's time for the tagline quiz.
I thought we were doing something different this week.
I was thinking about it, but I didn't prepare anything. Right. I was going to do a quiz about, I have a list of books that are banned in California prisons.
Oh, that's right.
We may come back to that,
right.
We're going to do the tagline quiz for now. So your tagline is, expect the impossible again.
Mission Impossible 2.
Yes! 2000 action adventure with Tom Cruise, Doug Ray Scott, I think that's how his name is said, Thandiwe Newton, who I did not recognize. She's in Riddick.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
The only female actor in this movie, and she gets called bitch multiple times.
God bless.
I will say that Tom Cruise is stop calling her bitch.
Right, there is
it's not a
thing that's praised. It's the bad guys are saying this to
but
be bad.
It is also like you have one female character.
Oh, it's just so funny. Though.
But yeah, Mission Impossible 2, IMF agent Ethan Hunt is sent to Sydney to find and destroy a genetically modified disease called Chimera. Mm-hmm. It's a great movie.
I cannot believe you're giving me such a softball.
I know.
Obviously, I got this because we have been watching the whole Mission Impossible series to prepare for the last one.
Yeah, and I saw Mission Impossible for the first time recently.
Yeah.
Fun fact, I have not seen the first Mission Impossible.
I watched it without you, and then you joined for 2 through 4 so far.
Yeah, and tonight we're probably going to watch 5.
And always the contrarian, I'm pretty sure that 2 is your favorite so far.
Oh my gosh, it was so good and so bad.
Like trashy movies.
I do like trashy movies.
That's fine. I love it for that reason too.
But 4 was really good too.
4 is like actually good.
I think 3 was paced poorly, but was like...
But you have Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's like the best villain in the whole franchise.
Yeah, so. Philip Seymour Hoffman is really good.
The rest of the movie is not good.
And then in 3, there is, oh my gosh, Amil Kapoor.
Yeah.
I am half Indian. I grew up watching Hindi films. My mind was blown. I didn't know he spoke English. And I should have known, like most educated people. I've been to India. I was
really
just
not
there.
A surprise. Yeah.
People speak English. Like a lot of people speak English. His English was flawless. And I was just like, this is weird.
Not just flawless. It was like sophisticated English.
Yeah.
You know?
And like he was doing these little jokes and like he was really good at that.
It was part of his character, of course, but like
he did a great job. And I was so happy to see him in that movie.
Yeah. Fun stuff. What a great franchise.
That's all for now. We're going to wrap up. Thank you for listening to In Contrast. I'm Nisha.
And I'm Alan.
Let us know what you think and your opinions. You can find us at In Contrast Pod on Instagram and Blue Sky.
Yeah.
We're on Blue Sky now, and there are some dank memes.
We ain't on no Twitter, that's for sure.
No, we're not on Twitter. Next up, we'll rate, review, and talk about Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane, I believe, and the 2010 movie by the same name with our boy Leonardo DiCaprio. Oh, Leo.
Getting into some Scorsese. I think this would be, this is our first Scorsese.
I know. I'm so excited for this.
Probably be the first of several Dennis Lehanes that we do.
Probably. Several. There will be many more Leonardo DiCaprios as well, I'm sure. These are going to be big ones. This one's going to be fun and exciting. I love a good thriller. The book is like gothic too. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyway,
I haven't seen it like since it came out, basically either.
Yeah, me neither.
So, yeah, I'm excited.
Okay, we'll see you next time, where we'll ask the important question: is the book really better than the movie?
Bye bye.